welcome back to our Judges study. Today we'll be studying Eli and Samuel, our last judges. Our next class, I will try to do some kind of review game where you can even join in at home. And then we will do a lesson on Ruth, because Ruth lived during the time of the Judges. Okay? So let's get started. We're going to start with our Judges song. Let's sing it. Come on, girls, join with me. God set judges over Israel, 1 brave woman, 14 men. They helped Israel fight their battles, led them back to God from sin. Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, Deborah, Gideon, Abimelech, Tola, Jer, Jephthah, Ibzan, Elon, Abdon, Samson, Eli, Samuel. Good job. You take up the papers, girls.
It's woman. One brave man.
All right.
One brave.
Let's get to our lesson. So today's lesson is found in 1 Samuel. It's not in the Judges. Remember we said at the beginning that Eli and Samuel were not found in the book of the Judges. So we're going to read from 1 Samuel today. And is 1 Samuel in the Old Testament or the New Testament, Julia? Is it old or new?
Old.
Very good, Hannah. The Old Testament. So let's sing the Old Testament song. Will you sing with me?
Mm-hmm.
Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel and Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah and Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. Okay, so I'm going to start reading. The reason I did Eli and Samuel together is that their stories are pretty enmeshed, and we're just going to mainly focus on Samuel and Eli's life together. So we're going to start at the beginning. This is the story of how Samuel was born. So there was this man named Elkanah, and he had 2 wives. This is in 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 2. He had 2 wives. The name of one was Hannah, and the name of the other Peninnah. Now Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. So we're going to pick up in verse 5. They have the family has gone to make an offering. They've gone to the tabernacle. And it says, to Hannah, Elkanah would give a double portion. This is in verse 5. Because he loved Hannah, although the Lord had closed her womb. And her rival also provoked her severely to make her miserable, because the Lord had closed her womb. So it was year by year, when she went up to the house of the Lord, that she provoked her. So Peninnah provoked Hannah again as they went up to the tabernacle. Therefore she wept, and she didn't eat. She was so distraught that Hannah couldn't eat. Then Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? Why do you not eat? And why is your heart grieved? Am I not better to you than 10 sons? So Hannah arose after they finished eating and drinking in Shiloh. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat by the doorpost of the tabernacle of the Lord. So here we meet Eli, and he's a priest, right? He's at the tabernacle. You have a question,
What
Hannah?
does Shiloh mean?
Shiloh is the place. Okay? Good question. All right, verse 10. And she, Hannah, was in bitterness of soul. That means she was very, very sad. And she prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. Then she made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look upon the affliction of your maidservant and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a man-child. So she didn't just ask for a child, she asked for a male child. Then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall come upon his head. So this was Hannah's prayer with a vow. And it happened as she continued praying before the Lord that Eli watched her mouth. Now Hannah spoke in her heart, so she kind of thought the words in her head and moved her lips, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she was drunk. So Eli said to her, "How long will you be drunk? Put away your wine from you." But Hannah answered and said, "No, my Lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor intoxicating drink, but I have poured out my soul before the Lord. Do not consider your maidservant a wicked woman, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief I have spoken until now." Then Eli answered and said, "Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition which you have asked of him." And she said, "Let your maidservant find favor in your sight." So the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. So she trusted in Eli's words. Okay, she believed that God will grant her prayer. All right, so at some time passed, and it doesn't say how long. Verse 20 says, "So it came to pass in the process of time that Hannah conceived and bore a son, and called his name Samuel, saying, because I have asked for him from the Lord." Okay, and Samuel, my little note in my Bible says, means heard by God. Okay, and that's a little bit of a teaser about what's going to happen. So she kept her vow, and after the child was weaned, she took him to the tabernacle, and he served with Eli. Eli raised him. Probably at this time they were weaned at about 4 to 5 to 6 years old. Okay, is what I've heard. So from that point on, he was raised by Eli at the tabernacle, and he served the Lord. Weaned. That means he was getting milk from his mom. He was being nursed by his mom. Okay, and a lot of people now, they wean anytime from 2 months to 18 months or even longer sometimes. But usually it's between 6 and 18 months that we wean in our society. But back then it was a lot longer. Okay? And then at the beginning of chapter 2, Hannah prayed, and it's a very beautiful prayer. I'm just going to read a couple of verses of it. She says, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. I smile at my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation. No one is holy like the Lord, for there is none besides you, nor is there any rock like our God." So she praised God in her prayer. So she brought him, it says that in verse 11, now we're in chapter 2, verse 11, "But the child ministered to the Lord before Eli the priest." And verse 12, "Now all the sons of Eli were corrupt, and they did not know the Lord." And that's a very important point. So Eli's children were corrupt. And then this interesting event happened. So Samuel was laying down to sleep one night, and he heard a voice saying, "Samuel, Samuel." And so he went to Eli and he said, "Well, here I am. Did you call me?" And Samuel said, "I didn't call you. Go back to bed." And he laid down and he hears, "Samuel, Samuel," for the second time. And he went to Eli and he said, "Eli, did you call me?" And Eli said, "I didn't call you. Go back to bed." And the third time he hears, "Samuel, Samuel." And Eli says, "I want you to go back to your bed and lay down, and I want you to say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant hears.'" So that's what he did. He went and laid down, and when he heard, "Samuel, Samuel," for the fourth time, he said, "I'm listening," basically is what he said. "I'm listening." And God gave Samuel a message, and he said, "Tell Eli his sons are wicked, and I know it, and he needs to fix it," basically is what he said. So the next morning, Eli called Samuel and he said, "So what was it you heard last night?" And Samuel, it's a very important point. What it says about Samuel later is Samuel grew and the Lord was with him, and he let none of God's words fall to the ground. So if he heard a word from God, he always told it. And so at this point, too, he tells Eli. But Eli doesn't do anything about it. He lets the wickedness continue. And the Philistines attacked, and his children, Hophni and Phinehas, he got this report. Hophni and Phinehas are dead. Your 2 sons are dead, and the ark of God has been captured. And we're in chapter 4 now, and it says in verse 18, Then it happened when he made mention of the ark of God that Eli fell off his seat backwards by the side of the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died. For the man was old and heavy, and he had judged Israel 40 years. Now, we're not going to go in much in depth more about Samuel's life, but I will say this. He anointed Saul and David. And it's interesting to note, I wrote down chapter 7, verse 15, Samuel dies. And it says that he had judged Israel all the days of his life. That's interesting to note, where all the other judges, it says he judged for 7 years, or he judged for 40 years. Like we just read about Eli, he judged for 40 years. But it says about Samuel that he judged all the days of his life. So that's pretty significant. All right, let's quickly list. I did not get my marker to write it down. I don't know that our friends at home can read it anyway, so let's just read them off. Read off our list. So Eli was a priest. Okay, he served at the tabernacle. He told Hannah that God would answer her prayer. He took in Samuel, and remember, Samuel served at the tabernacle. Would you please sit on your bottom? Thank you. His sons were corrupt. He told Samuel to listen to God. Eli did nothing about his corrupt sons, even when God told Samuel to pass along the message to Eli. Eli died when he heard his sons died, and the ark was captured by the Philistines. He judged Israel for 40 years. Now here's our facts about Samuel. Samuel was raised by Eli, remember, after he was weaned. And Hannah, remember, part of her vow was that no razor would ever come upon his head. And as far as we know, he kept that all the days of his life. Okay? Samuel heard the word of the Lord even when he was young. And, all right. I love this quote. It says, he let none of God's words fall to the ground. Okay? So that's the exact quote out of my New King James Version. He anointed both Saul and David as kings. He judged Israel all the days of his life. And he was raised from the dead by Saul. And that's a neat story. Actually, it was God's power that brought him up. But Saul wanted to talk to him one more time. And God allowed that conversation to take place. So that's a very, very interesting story. All right, so that's our lesson for today. We thank you for joining us.